Well, hey everyone, I'm Richard Gaspard, House of Worship Market Manager for Presonus. And today you're in for a real treat because I've got world renowned, legendary producer, mix engineer, bass player Mike Zuniga with me. Mike has played with several Grammy award winning Latin gospel artists, and he's even gotten a Grammy himself for one of the projects. Mike, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your career and about kind of where you came from and what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I started out when I was about 12. My dream originally was to be a baseball player. Things ended up being different. I started on a path to playing bass. My dad knew how to play bass, so he taught me how to play bass a little bit. That's kind of where it all started. That's where the love for music began. About the age of 20, I was in college thinking, okay, well, I'm going to do what we're taught to do. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to learn. And then I get this opportunity to play for a big Spanish Christian artist. His name is Marcos Witt. It's one of those opportunities that's like, you don't really have to think too much about. I told the director, yeah, let me think about it. I need to think about it. But in the back of my mind, I'm just going to wait 30 minutes and then call him back and be like, I'm good. So we did it. I ended up putting school on hold. That was 2003. I've had a lot of schooling. I thought I'll do this, and then maybe if I get to come back, I'll finish school. Plans were different. So I ended up doing music. I played with Marcos. I've played with several different, like Rich mentioned, Grammy award-winning artist. 2017, we did Madison Square Garden with a band from Guatemala. They packed out Madison Square Garden, 15,000 people. The band is called Miel San Marcos. We did a live recording there. That was 1 week after Harvey. So I went through Harvey and then managed to get to New York after that, did the recording. That was an awesome opportunity. And as of last September, I am the musical director for Marcos Witt again. So it's been an awesome ride. It's been a journey. I'm loving every minute of it, just enjoying life. Even in the midst of quarantine, in the midst of all the stuff that we're living, man, it's good to be able to do something that we love. And I'm honored to be here with you, Rich, and just to be able to share how I do some things here at home.
Yeah, it's our pleasure too, man. For those of you watching, Mike and I are relatively new friends. We just got introduced earlier this year by a mutual friend who is the drummer at Lakewood Church there in Houston. And as a side note, I lived in Houston for a couple of years from 2016 to 2017. And as I was trying to get work around town as a bass player, and I came across Mike's videos on YouTube, and I remember I remember watching them and going, well, I guess I'm not going to get any work in this town. Uh, he's a great player, really, really talented musician. And as I'm getting to know him, just a really great guy in general. A little bit more about him. He's got almost 44,000 Instagram followers, just north of 61,000 Facebook
Yeah.
followers, and almost 38,000 people on YouTube. So really influential guy, especially in that Latin gospel genre. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about a lot of what his processes are. He also runs and operates a studio there in Houston. And we're going to talk about his process on how he tracks bass, how he approaches bass. And he uses Studio One, and he's got a lot of PreSonus gear there in his studio at home, and then at the full recording studio that he works at. And so I want to go ahead and say, if you are listening to this on computer speakers right now, go ahead and put headphones on. Pause it, get yourself some headphones, or if you can plug in the studio monitors or larger speakers to really be able to appreciate the subtleties that you're going to hear, and really the fidelity of what he's going to do. You want to be able to hear this on full spectrum type listening device, not just your laptop or phone or something like that. So So, Mike, just go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about your process. I know that your normal process is a little bit different than what you're going to show us today, but just kind of walk us through what you would do in a typical scenario.
For sure. So let's say that I get a song that I have to track. You know, obviously we would have the song imported. You mentioned something different. Typically what I do is I have a little pedal board setup that I've got a compressor, I've got a clean boost, I've got an overdrive, I've got an octave, and then I've got the tuner. Even something to note on that, the tuner at the end is kind of not the common thing. Everyone's like, doesn't the tuner go in the beginning? Well, I had an issue with my pedals, so at the beginning, and I had bad cables. I won't mention the name, but it was a solderless cable in a big auditorium, and the bass just starts going crazy. It just starts going crazy. So I'm like, mute. Well, mute didn't do anything because that was before the problem. So I said, never again. Moved it on over to the end. Anything ever happens, I just mute, and I'm good. So being that I don't have the pedal board, what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you the screen. I have the track loaded up. It's a song that we actually did a live recording for in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia. I'm going to play it for you, and then I'm going to just show you guys how my approach is to listening to it. Like Rich said, I'm going to throw on headphones as well. My room is an extra bedroom in our house. It's got some panels, as you can see behind me, but it's not professionally treated. So even when I track bass, I like to track bass with headphones because I like to commit my effects. When I send a track out, I like to send tracks out that are committed. Why? Because sometimes I've heard stuff that I've tracked and I've given options, and then in the end, maybe it wasn't the option that I personally, as an instrumentalist, would have gone for. So, and it's also, I've also learned that some producers just like not having to double work. So they're like, man, I love what you're doing. I love the sound that you've got. Just send me what you've got. So today we're going to do it a little different. I'm going to show you some blending. I'm going to show you some EQ. But let's get that started. So if you've got your headphones, let's throw the headphones on. I'm going to grab my bass, and I'm going to share the screen with you guys so that you can see Studio One. All right, so I've got my bass, and something that I like to do, always like to do, is open up the tuner plugin from PreSonus. And the reason I like to do this, I've gotten halfway through a song, feeling the vibe, just loving what I'm laying down, and then remembering I didn't tune before I started this song. And I know that Rich said that I'm a professional, so yeah, I should have tuned before the beginning of this track. But sometimes it happens, so I've kind of always made this my first go-to thing. Open up the tuner, tune up. Since we're not using a pedal board, do it within PreSonus One. So let's get tuned up. And I knew I had a video today, so I did tune today, Rich, just in case you were wondering. All right, so let's close that up. Beginning of the track. Let's record this. Yeah.
Cool.
So that was a one-taker, Rich. I don't know how many times you've done one-takers, but that kind of happens for me often. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
That
every single track I've ever played on has been one take.
That never happens.
One take and a lot of editing.
Right? Exactly. All right, so let me share my screen with you guys so you guys can see what we got going on here. Let me put the bass up and we'll get to editing this bass track. All right, so we've got our bass track in. So something that we were talking about earlier, Rich, was synth bass. A lot of modern music usually has synth bass in it. This track actually does have synth bass in it. Let's listen to it without the synth bass first. Let's focus on the bass tone, and then we'll blend in that synth bass back in. And basically the synth bass in production phase is basically doing the same syncopated bass line that I'm doing live. So normally, I got my track here. If the track alone sounds good, then there's not a whole lot to do. But sometimes, typically with bass, what we need to do is get it to cut better. You know, one thing that we talked about, Rich, was a lot of us bass players, without knowing sometimes when we look at our EQ, we think, well, bass needs to be low and big, and then it also has to be, you know, crisp and be able to cut through. But we think high and low, so we typically do the Smiley Face EQ. I think a lot of us have been guilty of doing Smiley Face EQs in our lives. So we got to know first off, guys, that that's not the EQ that we should be doing. I get the question, how should I EQ my bass? And typically where we're EQing, where we're cutting, is the fundamental frequencies that we've got for the tone to come out. So let's just listen to the bass soloed first. Now, when I solo, you're not going to hear my voice for a second, but let's check this out. So one of the processes that I like to do is I will duplicate the track complete because I need the audio file duplicated as well. Obviously, we're gonna bring that down first, and I'm not just gonna double the bass. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up Ampire. Let's see, there it is. Now we can go on Ampire. Since I'm not using the pedal board, typically what I would do is I'd put a little overdrive on it. I don't want to sound like an electric. I just want a little grit. Typically in the mix, you probably won't hear the grit. You'll perceive the grit, but I'm not trying to sound overdriven bass. I just want that cut to come through. So the first thing I would do here is I would pick my cab, and let's go with the fan favorite, right? When we're on tour, everyone wants that 810 behind us. And then let's do the amp STV. That's fine. So something that I was playing with, let's listen to this. This is just as is. Also, let's solo this track. Right, we don't want it that loud. So that's no tube screamer track in. And again, if we're wearing headphones, you can start to hear the subtleties in it. It's a funky track, and you would think, well, why would you put an overdrive on a funky track? Well, if you just want a little bit more of that cut, that works. Now, the other thing that I like to do, and that was a real simple, I mean, I didn't do anything. I literally opened up Ampire. I haven't even started to mess with the amp. I just literally turned the screamer on, and because the fundamental tone in my way of doing things is gonna be my bass. So I'm just gonna bring in slightly this other duplicated track. So something else that I like to do, remember we talked about EQ. We've got this EQ here. And if you guys see, I've got a bump going here. I've also got a low cut. This is more me doing when I'm producing. So I record bass full range, but when I start to kind of be in production mode, I like to start to clean up things. So I've got that roll off, I've got this little bump. So let's listen to that real quick. Let's mute this. We're not going to peak it that much, but we are going to do it. And I've learned this, Rich. I don't know in your experience, but I've learned that sometimes moves that I make, I can't make in solo mode, because when I do moves or EQ moves in solo mode, it sounds like, oh wait, that's not the way the bass is supposed to sound. But I found that when I'm mixing, I'll do what most engineers do. We narrow Q and just start to sweep. Now, I know the area that I want to be in, which is typically around that 190, 200. So we're not going to go that high, obviously. We're going to come back. And typically when I'm rolling, again, this is when I'm in production mode. I could be anywhere from 50, maybe even upwards of 70. And what I'm trying to do in that is, if the kick and the low end is occupying that space, I don't want to be fighting with it. So I like to just clean that up so that the kick has the bottom end, has the attack, but really my bass is also cutting through, not because of 70 or 50, but really maybe more in the 200, the 180. I haven't cut anything else in mids. I haven't added anything else in highs. I'm just simply doing small little moves that help me kind of get the bass to cut. Let's go to the chorus of this. So right there, you can hear that difference in presence. If you're wearing headphones, you'll notice it's subtle, but it's there. Now, again, we're talking about sending off tracks, right, Rich? So this is a process that I would do for myself when I'm here. If I'm sending out a track, I would probably do what you do in this case. If I'm not using pedals, if I'm going straight into the interface, I would give them a clean track and then let the producer go, well, I need a little bit more grit. I need a little bit more of this, and then bring it up. But typically, there's not a whole lot. I mean, sometimes I think we want to overcomplicate things. What's the perfect EQ setting? What's the perfect compression setting? A lot of that has to do with input. If I'm driving it more, well, then I'm going to need to adjust. If my bass is an active bass, if my bass is a passive bass. So there's different things that are happening here. I don't know if you have any questions as far as what we've done, maybe something that you think might be helpful for the viewers.
Well, I know that my mind goes back to when I was working at a film production facility for a while, and we also operated it. I was audio manager of this film production um, company, but then we also had uh, groups who would come in and record, and I produced a couple of records. And I remember one particular band who came in, and a lot of beginners make this mistake, and especially bass players. The bass player didn't like to hear fret buzz in his ears. And when we soloed up his channel, or it was just by itself when I was working on it, he didn't want to hear all of the clickiness of him moving between the frets and all of that. And he wanted to recut the tune. And I was like, well, man, just trust me on this. And he was very adamant about it. So we actually had a couple of tracks open on the tape machine. This is back in the days of tape. And so I let him recut apart using the tone that he felt like worked.
Right.
And when we got down to mix down, everybody else in the band was like, I can't understand what the bass is playing. I don't, it's like it's so muffled I can't hear it. And I mean, and these are teenagers, and I was in my 30s, so I kind of use that as a little bit of a teaching moment to say, so look, I kept your original part. This is it. And so I did notice, when we were listening to your track by itself, you've got some of that, the fret buzz in there. A lot of guys, especially younger players, younger producers, engineers, they want to get rid of that.
Right.
But really, that's where a lot of the presence of the bass lives. And I noticed with you bumping up in that 200, you're actually kind of catching the bottom part of that. I mean, some of that stuff's a lot higher up, but but I think it's important to emphasize that you didn't run away from the noise.
Right.
It's painfully obvious when you hear it by itself.
Right.
But when you put it in the mix, there's a presence there that that really helps the bass sit in the mix. I know when I'm playing a rock tune, depending on which bass I'm playing, I'll dig in more. And one of my basses really has this really cool thing that when I really start to drive it hard, it distorts a little bit and it gets kind of fret buzzy. By itself, it's like, man, I don't know. But then when you put it in the mix,
Right.
there's like this, oh my gosh, there's this real cool aggression. And I just thought it was interesting that you didn't try to cover that.
Right.
You didn't try to get rid of that. And then when you hear it in the mix, that's where the presence of the bass really, really lives.
Definitely. And it's like I said earlier, when we try to do things in solo mode, we're going to overanalyze it. When I sent off, again, we talked about committing and maybe sending multiple options. I used to do the multiple options thing. And then I kind of wanted to change it up and said, man, this is like when I hear the record, I want to hear the part. It's like, guitar players that record a clean guitar and then go, well, I'll let the producer put in overdrive and delays and, to his liking.
Yeah, I don't know any guitar players who will ever do that.
That's actually a good point to make. You're right. In that world, it would be equivalent of that. So I just said, you know what? I want to hear the bass track like on the final record, the way that I heard it when I got the phone call to track the bass, and when I recorded it, what I was feeling and hearing, and when I heard it, that's not what was happening. So I started committing to these moves, these changes. The first couple of times, and I still remember very clearly, I get this phone call back, and they're like, "Hey, Mike, man, the track, you played it great. It was perfect. It was great. There's just one little thing. We soloed the track, and it's distorting. I don't know, man. I don't know if it was like you just didn't notice or you overlooked it. I think you were hitting the input too hard, but it's distorted." And I'm like, no. I meant to do that. Listen to the song in the mix. Put the fader up, listen to the song. Can you hear the distortion? And they're like, no, we don't hear it in the song. But when I solo it, it's distorted. Now, there's a difference between saturation of digital, clipping, and then there's a difference. Everything that I do, even with my overdrive pedal, I'm not trying to sound like a guitar player. And I know that there are bands out there that that is the sound. You know, when I hear Muse and different types, that is the bass sound. And the stuff that we're doing, the stuff that I'm doing, that's not the tone that I'm going for. So that's not the tone that I'm seeking. What I'm doing is I'm just blending it in. So if I lose the fundamental bass tone, then I feel like I'm not giving what is the 100% capacity of what I could do. So everything that I do is subtle. But again, in solo mode, you definitely hear it. In the mix mode, you perceive it because you can hear the notes. That's one thing that a lot of people kind of say sometimes is, man, I can always hear the notes that you're playing, but it's in conjunction of the different things. It's like compression. I've heard some people do compression and they're like, I don't even think that compressor's doing anything. I don't hear a difference. But when we track, you see the dynamic range and you see the jumps, and then when I turn that compressor on, it's like if I had the perfect technique, right? What we're all after, but that compressor's helping me do that. So everything that I do is in subtle moves, but I think it's very perceivable when you hear stuff in mix.
So what would you say to someone who's relatively new to the recording world and not necessarily a bass player? I mean, that's what you and I do, but just someone who's relatively new to this world. In addition to what we just talked about, the subtlety, and then not being afraid of the fret noise and stuff in the bass track. What are some other things? I know you kind of touched on the whole layering of the synth. What are some other techniques that someone might use to get that larger tone? Typically in a recording studio environment.
For sure. So I think that something that happens a lot is when we come in and we have an act, and I'll speak from a bass perspective since I'm a bassist, but when we come in with an active bass, a lot of people go, I need more low end. I need more high end. So their preamp on the bass is maxed out. And then when you think of the opposite spectrum, we're all on this quest for the ultimate 1965 precision bass that not all of us get to own. We're after this sound.
Sidebar, guys, I have a 65p bass, but anyway, that's a whole other post for a whole other day. But
right.
Anyway,
we're all after this like vintage, original sound, but we have to understand that maxing out our preamps is not going to give us a similar sound. So if I was to do or say for any other instrumentalist, something that I think that is important is, we have to really spend the time to find our sound. So whether you're a drummer, whether you're a guitar player, whether you're a bass player, it's about finding something that makes us all unique. If I get a bass track, someone might tell me, well, I want this cool slap solo part on the bridge, or something of that nature, or play something cool there. I might think, well, it might be inspired. What I'm playing is, I have my musical influences, but I'm not going to try to do something that any bass player that's out there would know, like Victor Wooten. I can't play like Victor Wooten. So I have to have something that makes me special and unique. So I remember telling my wife this one time. We did a Christmas song, and it's a song that Mariah Carey sings. And she's like, and she's my wife is an incredible singer. And she's like, I can't do all the things that Mariah Carey does. Mariah Carey's amazing. And I said, look, if they wanted Mariah Carey on the track, they would have called Mariah Carey. They called you for a reason. One of the reasons that they didn't call Mariah, maybe the millions of dollars it might take to get her on a track, right? But I told her they called you, so just approach it and sing the song the way that you would sing this song. Like, that's when people ask us to do work or to participate on projects, they're looking for something special and unique that we've got. So if we don't have something unique to give, then they could go to anybody. So I've kind of found, not a niche, but I would say a tone or a sound and a feel. And I think that has been what's gotten me work throughout the years. I'm not trying to sound like Marcus Miller. I'm not trying to sound like Victor or all these other amazing bass players. I'm just trying to find my lane and to just keep going forward. So if you're out there listening to this, man, especially in these times that we're living in, You know, you've got time. Most of us out here have extra time. Let's use it, you know, with wisdom. Let's you know, if you're feeling like there's something that you need to just better, spend some time on it. I mean, maybe we need to get off Netflix for a while and pick up our instruments again, or, you know, just get back to the basics. Everyone wants to go from point A to point Z, but it's part of the journey. The journey is really the growing experience. So that's what I would recommend to anyone on any instrument. Give it your best, you know, find what it is that you're good at, find what it is that you're not good at, and really just start to craft and perfect, you know, those areas.
What would you say to a beginning recordist? You know, someone who may have a $99 interface. They've got Studio One artist at home, and they're starting to just kind of experiment with the application. What would be your advice to them?
For sure. So the way that I got into Studio One was I tried different setups. When I started my studio in 2008, that's, I guess, the beginning part of like the more serious setup. I started recording probably still in high school. I remember having the M box, the little light blue, you know, interface, and then I had the 001, some other, you know, products that were out back then. But it went growing and growing. So when I went to school, my professor said, you know, okay, this is what you're going to do, and this is what you're gonna learn, but don't go out there and buy this little interface. That's not, you know, what we're teaching you to do. The problem is that they don't remember that we're college students. You know, we don't have the budgets to buy these big setups. So I just started with a 2-channel interface, you know, and I would record someone on one pass on acoustic, another pass on vocal, and I'd listen back and go, that's the worst recording I've ever heard in my life. You know, and then I'm like, what would I do? How to, now in the age that we live in, how to anything on YouTube, and it's going to help. So then I started realizing, oh, I was doing this wrong, I was doing that wrong. So my advice is just get out and do it. If you have the $99 box interface, just get out and start recording stuff, whether it's, you know, understand the mic that you're using, understand the frequencies, the range that the mic has, understand why you can't get low end out of a certain mic. It's not your recording interface. It's not that maybe the acoustic is not producing. Maybe it's the microphone that you're using. So it all comes in conjunction. But even with Studio One, when I opened up Studio One, I'd never used Studio One before. Literally what I did was, let me share the screen with you. I would literally open up Studio One, have nothing in the session, nothing recorded, and I would just start hovering over stuff. Okay, that's what that is. Okay. And then I started opening up, you know, once I got some stuff recorded, I started kind of hovering over, oh, what is that? And then I didn't want to keep going back and hovering, so I figured out Studio One has the option to keyboard shortcuts. That was a game changer for me because I made up my own quirky shortcuts that only I know. And every single time I go somewhere and I open up Studio One, I can import that scheme, or, you know, the shortcut, and on any machine I've got exactly the way I know how to work. So my workflow just goes fast. It's not like trying to learn a whole new thing. And you can import different templates. So it was just really cool. It was so simple. The drag and drop feature of Presonus. I mean, there's so many different things. People ask me all the time, why do you use Studio One? And I use it because it's easy. I use it because it makes my workflow faster, and it just helps me be creative. I'm not trying to figure out how to export something when I know that I can just consolidate to 0 and find my path, drag it over to it on the sidebar, and I'm done. You know, it's not, I'm not up here looking for where is export files and, you know, all these different things. So it's just about spending time with it. It's like anything. We have to spend time with it. So even if you've got that small interface, man, just get out there and start doing some stuff. Record your bass. If you're a bass player, record bass. And if you have, we're living in the age where everyone is doing covers, Rich. Like right now, the internet is flooded. You know, we've got this so much time. Everyone is flooding with covers. Let that be your thing. You only need one input for that. You've got your track, record your bass, and then figure out, man, what can I do to make this better? And throughout the journey, like I mentioned earlier, we're just going to naturally learn and grow.
Yeah, those are great points, man. We are in this information age where um, we literally have the entire world's worth of information at our fingertips, by way of YouTube and Facebook and social media. And there's a lot of folks who are recording things together across the planet from each other,
Yeah.
and we live in an amazing time, and it seems like artistry and technology and know-how is just ramping up. And I think about, man, if I had those tools when I was a young player.
Yeah.
My first recording experience was on a Yamaha 4-track cassette.
Wow.
Coincidentally, I looked at your bio. It was about the same time you were born. And and so, but I mean, that was the tools that I had. And you
Yeah.
recorded 3 tracks and you bounced it over to the 4th one, and then you recorded 2 more and you bounced it over to the
Wow.
1st one, and then you just did that forever. And then your recording sounded more like compounded tape hiss than anything else. um, but we live in this amazing age, and just to echo what Mike just said, use those resources that are at our literal fingertips. So much information is out there, so many tutorials, as you guys who have been on this channel have seen. Gregor and Joe Gilder, and those guys are amazing Studio One dudes. And then Ray Tanzen, who's our senior product manager for Mixer Ecosystems. His videos are amazing. I've done a few. Mike's got a great channel. A lot of it's featuring his playing, but there's a lot of really cool things that you can check out as well. So Mike, what is so if somebody was interested in seeing your stuff on YouTube, is it just a matter of just Googling your name, just doing searching Mike X Zuniga on
Yep. You
Facebook?
can look up Mike X Zuniga. And I believe another way to do it is youtube.com/ I think it's Mike X Zuniga. I just recently changed it because for years I had MX Zuniga, and I'm trying to, like, across all platforms be the same. So Instagram is at Mike X Zuniga, Facebook is Mike X Zuniga, and I believe YouTube is now / Mike X Zuniga. So yeah, most of it's playing, but I'm trying to do more things again now that we've got more time. I'm learning to do more video stuff. So yeah, I'm trying to do some unboxing, some actual in use of different pedals or different things. I'm really looking forward to being able to check out some of the interfaces that Presonus has. So hopefully in the future we can do some stuff with that as well. I would love to check that stuff out.
Very, very cool. Well, Mike, man, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure to get to know you as a person, not only as a musician and
Likewise.
engineer, and look forward to seeing you grow and everything that you're doing, and just what God's enabled you to do, and the platform that He's given you. Just proud to know you, man, and
Thank you.
just wish you all the best. And guys, that's going to wrap it up for us. Subscribe to the channel. Come back for more videos on Facebook, YouTube, all the social media channels. And we appreciate you guys tuning in today.